This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The weekly wrap is the Week in News. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
I say the Week in News and not the What's Coming Up part because we've moved the What's Coming Up part to its own episode. That's going to be out tomorrow.
Bit of a change this week. We'll get into the new News Club lineup a little bit later. But to kick us off today, we'll take you through the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas and the latest in the Optus 000 outage.
Also, dramatic efforts to save climbers on Mt Everest this week. And we've got the latest in whale news.
It's the update that I didn't know I needed, Claire. Let's get into it.
So Taylor Swift's new album, The Life of a Showgirl, Larissa and I went pretty hard on that last week. It's absolutely smashing records and we thought it was worthwhile regrouping given the attention that we gave it last week.
I appreciated that attention on my holiday last week. These numbers will need to be updated as we head into the end of that first full week. But so far, 3.2 million albums sold in the first week. My question on that was, who buys albums these days?
The Uber fans.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So that means that she's on track to beat Adele's decade-old record when she released 25 back in 2015. Then there are, of course, the digital music services. I went pretty deep into how those are measured and suffice to say that the songs have already been streamed hundreds of millions of times.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of ways of calculating that in terms of what it means for album sales. But one calculation that I saw said that it had been streamed or songs off the album anyway, 250 million times on Spotify just in the first day.
That's crazy.
She's now worth over $2 billion US. That's according to Bloomberg. There was also this bottom line being boosted by the theatrical release. So it topped the box office in the US with $34 million in ticket sales in the US.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to experience it, I thought. Taylor Swift told Apple Music guru Zane Lowe that she welcomes the chaos. There's been a few different, conflicting opinions over this new album. But when you're breaking every record in sight, then why would you care, really?
Yep. We're not critics. Not going to tell you what I think.
I also take a bit of time to make up my mind. You need to listen to it,
That's
think
fine.
for a few weeks, let it settle in.
Not quick to judge. Just let it permeate.
That's right.
Moving on to the biggest news story of the week, and that, of course, is Israel and Hamas signing an agreement for a ceasefire, certainly the first phase of one anyway. That's off the plan that US President Donald Trump proposed. They aren't sitting in the same room or anything, Israel and Hamas. They were hammering it out via these go-betweens. That unfolded this week in Egypt.
Yeah, to be specific, they've signed up to phase one of that plan. So a ceasefire should come into place this morning. All remaining hostages taken from Israel in those Hamas terrorist attacks on October 7, 2023 will be released, and that will happen early next week. They think there are 48 people still being held and 20 of them are believed to be alive.
Israel's also going to pull back to what they're calling the yellow line. There's actually a map going around. I think Donald Trump even put it up on his Truth social media with a yellow line on it. They're not leaving Gaza, those Israeli troops. They'll go back to where they were positioned in August. Palestinian prisoners are also going to be released from Israeli jails. It's expected that there's about 250 Palestinians who are serving life sentences, as well as 1,700 Gaza residents who have been detained by the Israelis since the war began 2 years ago.
As for what they're saying about it, Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu is calling this agreement a diplomatic success and a national and moral victory for the state of Israel. Hamas says the agreement doesn't mean they've abandoned their goals of the liberation of Palestine and the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Yeah, they say that those are things that are still on the table. So that's phase one. The rest of the details in Trump's 20-point plan have yet to be discussed in any real substantive way. The key points will be very, very difficult to agree to in the rest of that agreement. They're about how Gaza might be governed when that fighting does come to an end. Also, the plan proposes a temporary transitional government that would be led by an international committee that's overseen by Trump, and it would have some involvement from the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Yeah, so Hamas would be barred from any role in Gaza going forward. That was a key demand from the Israel side. And there is an expectation that the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank, would eventually take over. As you said, that's a sort of a tricky one to get agreement on.
Yeah, there's also the demand that Hamas disarm. There are those in Israel, in the government, who don't want to settle for anything less than Hamas's complete destruction, that they're completely dismantled. You mentioned Hamas's goals earlier. Another one is that they want the destruction of Israel. That's part of essentially their reason for being. So some in Israel say that this is not over until Hamas is completely ended.
So some big questions about getting through the next stages to a lasting peace, but the development has been very well received. Pictures of people celebrating in Israel and in Gaza, people I know have been posting online, celebrating this. And the picture of Trump receiving the news that there was an agreement that had been made was something to note.
Yeah, so I sort of felt like it was a bit like that moment. Remember back in 2001, September 11, the images of George W. Bush, president at the time, when a staffer leaned in to let him know the news. He was at an event at a school. He was in a classroom sitting on a little chair, and it became a bit of an iconic image of something that had really
caught on camera.
Big that had happened. So this week Trump was at a roundtable event. It was with conservative influencers. There were media there, photographers, cameras, the whole sort of setup. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, leant over and passed him a note. That note said, which the cameras were able to see, you need to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce the deal first.
And there was a very Trump-like still picture of him with that expression on his face as he read the note. The media obviously captured that, and Trump then said, I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal on the Middle East and they're going to need me pretty quickly. And that was how the world found out that a deal had been done.
Yeah, the news went around pretty quickly. And look, Trump did put forward the plan, and he's not been backwards in coming forwards
unsurprisingly
to take the credit. He said that he hopes to attend a signing ceremony in Egypt, and also we know that the Israeli president has cleared his Sunday schedule for a visit to Israel from Trump. So we'll just see how that unfolds now over the weekend. It's an interesting quirk of timing, Jodie, because the Nobel Peace Prize is about to be announced.
That's right. And this is a bit of a difficult one for us to tackle because we're recording this mid-Friday. The Nobel Committee announced the winner on Friday night.
Yeah.
So we're raising it because it's likely to be a talking point, with Trump openly campaigning for the prize for months and striking this agreement is quite something. It's a real development.
Yeah, so the officials from the Nobel Prize point out that the prize is meant to honour people who did stuff in 2024 when Trump was elected, but he wasn't in office.
Tempering his expectations, perhaps.
And look, maybe he has won it. Who knows? Future us will find that out pretty soon. Before we finish off, as optimistic officials are, and if they're right, the war is over. But there's lots of work to do to make Gaza something even close to functional. Hamas officials say that more than 67,000 Gazans have been killed. Their cities have been flattened, the infrastructure completely gone. It's making that job of getting the territory close to something that's functional that's going to be a really big job.
Yeah, first things first, the United Nations says that it's ready to go with a plan to significantly increase the amount of food and other humanitarian aid that is getting into Gaza as soon as that ceasefire takes hold. There's a plan to scale up the delivery of aid over the first 60 days of a ceasefire. About 170,000 metric tonnes of food, medicine, other supplies are all ready to be taken in for the 2.1 million people there who are desperate to receive them.
Yeah, there's a long way to go, but that's certainly the start of it. Three other stories that we've been following this week. Let's start with the ongoing fallout from the Optus outage. That was an outage that hit on September 18. It affected 600 000 calls, mainly in South Australia, Northern Territory, Western Australia. There's a little pocket of New South Wales as well. It was linked to 3 deaths.
Yeah, more information has come to light about the litany of stuff-ups associated with this outage, thanks to Senate estimates, where a number of people were questioned this week. They included the head of the government's communications department and also the boss of the regulator ACMA, which is the Australian Communications and Media Authority.
Yeah, things got pretty heated in that Senate estimates committee. Just to pause for a second, I love Senate estimates.
So good, aren't they? It unearths all
As a
sorts of
journalist,
stuff.
you must have got pretty excited when you were based in Parliament House to see that theatre.
Absolutely. You never know what's coming.
Yeah. The opportunity, of course, is for our senators from across all the parties. They go on committees and they pull in the public servants and the officials to really grill them on how government policy is being executed and where the money's going and what processes are working. So
what mistakes have been made.
What mistakes have been made, for example. So, yeah, that's exactly what this was about this week. Look, when it comes to this sort of conflicting information about who was told what and when, basic facts about that outage, in the event of a major outage like this one, Optus is actually obliged to alert stakeholders and the regulator, but it messed that process up. It came to light that Optus sent its alert to an old retired email address when it attempted to notify the Federal Communications Department on the day of the outage.
Yeah, which meant that it took another whole day for that department to actually be properly notified. The old wrong email address has caught out a few of us. Optus had been told about the change in that email address, but for some reason it used that outdated one. It's no longer monitored frequently. So it took Optus 13 hours initially to just detect the problem. Then it sent those emails to that wrong address, and it also misled the regulator about the scale of the outage.
Yeah, so its first message said that only 10 000 calls had been affected. It turned out to be 60 times that number. ACMA wasn't told of the full scale of the issue until a phone call with the Optus boss, Stephen Rue, that happened the day after the outage.
Yeah, the Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young hopped into the boss of ACMA at Senate estimates. She says that the regulator wasn't being proactive enough. It was basically sitting back, waiting for Optus to drip feed information when actually the regulator's job is to be on the front foot and to keep these companies in line. Fingers have also been pointed at the government and particularly at the Communications Minister, Annika Wells.
Yeah, she's been under a lot of pressure this week, certainly since the outage happened, but with Parliament sitting this week, the House of Reps anyway, in this committee hearing, it really has seen her at the front of the political news this week. The coalition directed all of its question time queries to her. They criticised her for travelling to the United Nations in New York. We talked about that on the weekly wrap in the wake of the outage. Both she and the regulators say that the blame squarely lies with Optus, though, that it's a corporate failure, not a government failure.
Yeah, they're keen to be seen to be being proactive about this, though. The government has introduced legislation creating a 000 custodian. So this was recommended by the Bean Review after the last big Optus outage 18 months ago. It was led by someone called Richard Bean, hence
Love
the Bean
the
Review.
Bean Review. That's a great name.
Sounds good, doesn't it? The custodian will have complete oversight of the 000 system. They'll be able to look at things like the length of calls so that they can see whether or not there's an issue and detect if people aren't getting through.
Would have thought with AI these days you could just set up a little bot and
True.
monitor that
Little
kind
machine.
of stuff. I'm sure it's that simple. Look, some experts say that would have made some sort of difference having that kind of monitoring in place, that it might have taken 13 minutes to recognise the Optus problem, not 13 hours to do it. The minister also held a meeting this week with the telco bosses. They were told to come to Canberra on Tuesday to have that meeting. Strongly suggested maybe that they
Invited / told.
They agreed to be subjected to a simulated outage in the in the next few weeks. So I guess a real test of the system about whether it is going to work, particularly with bushfire season coming up.
Yeah, speaking of bushfires, MPs from rural and regional areas have called for more to be done to make sure that country people are able to get through to 000 and can rely on that system. They're often at the forefront of those sort of natural disasters, fires, floods. Obviously, the isolation makes country people more vulnerable. One of the other recommendations from that Bean review was to bring in something called disaster roaming, which means that if your 000 call can't get through on your network, then it automatically finds another one.
Yeah, it hasn't been implemented yet, that recommendation, but there calls for a deadline to give the telcos to make that happen, to reassure people who live in country areas that they will have access to that service. Moving on to a different sort of emergency situation now, Jody, hundreds of people were stranded near Mt Everest. There was a massive blizzard that went through earlier this week.
Yeah, it was a really unusual time of year for such a big snowstorm. I know that because I did the trek to Everest Base Camp years ago now, and we went at exactly this time of year because we must have been told that things are quite calm and settled there. So videos posted online showed that some of the hikers' tents were almost completely buried by snow. Some of them had signs of hypothermia. They needed help pretty urgently, and it obviously made the trails really hard to navigate because there's so much snow on top of them.
Yeah, one of the misunderstandings was that these people were trying to summit Mount Everest. They weren't actually trying to do that. They were more of the sort of everyday hikers that were exploring that sort of backcountry around that area below that peak and around Everest on the Tibet side as well. They were day hikers, campers, people on these sort of guided backpacking trips.
Yeah, you forget that it's a whole sort of mountainous region and there are valleys and different areas. You don't have to be just summiting Everest itself. The reason there were so many people there is because it was China's Golden Week holiday. So that's a special holiday. It gives the Chinese people 8 days off work. Forget our little long weekends.
Yeah.
So it's a big week of travel. Obviously, experts say that the situation was really dangerous. Even though they weren't those serious sort of climbers in the summit zone, they were still at high altitude up there. A lot of them didn't have the right gear and clothing to keep them warm, and there's always the danger of landslides and things as well.
Yeah, and what played out after that was one of the biggest search and rescue operations that region has ever seen. The Chinese government mobilised to get close to 1,000 people out. Firefighters, even local residents were involved in that effort. The visitors were eventually taken to nearby towns and to villages. Remarkably, everyone on the Everest was okay. Actually, those who were higher up on base camp and above, it seems, they were fine.
Yeah, the people on the Tibet side were okay. And then there was one South Korean hiker who died on the Nepal side of Everest. So he was climbing a different mountain called Mira Peak, and he was found dead after going missing in that storm. It's a really popular destination for travellers. Last year, the Everest region attracted a record number of people, 540,000, and that creates some issues in itself. But a bit of a reminder this week about some of the dangers there and that unpredictable weather.
Was it pretty safe when you went? Did you feel like it was a safe region to go to?
I felt safe with the group that I went with. We had like great local guides who were looking after us, but there were helicopters coming in every day to chopper people out who had altitude sickness.
Yeah.
So you were reminded that
the dangers of it.
Yeah. I did think on that trip there's no way I'd ever actually try to summit Everest. I'm not quite in that category of people, but base camp was
It seems
nice.
like a full-time job if you do want to do Mount Everest. It's not something to be done casually.
No,
anyway.
exactly.
And to finish us up this week with our trio of other news, from just 150 whales in the early 1960s to potentially 60,000 of them today. So there was a report out this week saying that pretty much when it comes to the Australian eastern humpback, their population has bounced back.
Yeah, marine scientist Wally Franklin, who's been studying these whales for more than 30 years, has called their recovery a near miracle. By 1963, when humpback hunting was banned in the Southern Hemisphere, 99.5% 5% of the population was lost.
Yeah, those whalers went hard. The recovery's been pretty steady since then, about 10 to 11% growth each year. The research team that put this report out, they used 40 years of whale photos from scientists, also whale watching operators, everyday people who have submitted these pics to an app that's called Happy Whale.
Lovely name.
You can go through, and apparently the experts anyway can identify individual humpbacks by the patterns on the underside of their tail.
Our eastern Australian humpbacks have done so well compared to other whale populations across the world. Our southern right whales, there are some others that seem to come through past Sydney along the east coast. They're still struggling well below their pre-whaling numbers. Scientists reckon that our long coastlines give the humpback mums lots of safe spots to sort of duck in and hang out with their calves and be safe.
Yeah, and apparently the humpbacks are a bit more adaptable as well. They breed every 2 to 3 years. The southern right whales only calve about every 4 years or so. So it's a bit easier for the eastern Australian ones to go a bit harder with their population growth. There's less competition for food as well for the eastern Australian whales.
Yeah, the scientists say that the population might now be reaching what they call carrying capacity. So basically that's the maximum number that the environment can sustain. For now, though, it's a conservation success story, something that we can be proud of, and Australia really is leading the charge in their protection. Also nice for those of us who like to go out whale watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just reminded me, it wasn't that long ago that Australia and Japan were really at loggerheads over whaling.
That's right.
There were these big International Whaling Commission meetings, and they really were the venue for big showdowns between Australia and Japan. Japan was really at some times asking Australia to better protect Japanese whaling ships from activists in our oceans. But we were rather sceptical about Japan's claims that they were doing scientific research. But essentially, Australia was saying that it was just commercial whaling by another name.
Yeah, there were some really graphic pictures that I remember coming out to, really paint the picture of what that hunting involved. Australia's actually taken Japan to the International Court of Justice over it.
Yeah.
That was a whole thing.
Yeah, it really was. We've done a Squiz shortcut on whales as well. That was a whole Kate Watson special. She came into the office one day saying, what's going on with whales and how do they migrate? Because I see it in the news all the time. So we'll put a link to that episode in the episode notes if you want to check it out. It's a good one.
Yeah, fascinating creatures.
Squiz recommends Jody. I did something this week that I've been meaning to do for a really long time, and that's actually take a subscription to Vanity Fair. I head to the Vanity Fair website quite a bit. It's actually the mag that I probably first bought when I was a teenager. It was such a special thing to get an American version of the Vanity Fair mag. A little girl in Albury sort of heading into the newsagent and doing that.
Yeah, the big smoke.
If you're not that familiar with it, it's American. I like the American version. There's a British version of it as well. They do politics, which I'm not so interested in, but they do great profiles on interesting people. They could be celebs, they could be politicians, they could be writers, they could be musicians. It's a really interesting mag. I think they do good long form articles. I go to their website every couple of weeks or so, and there's always something interesting there. If you want to go and check it out, you can usually get one article or so for free in the month. But yeah, I find myself wanting more. It's $1 a month.
Is that like a one-time special or something? Or I feel like if it was that cheap, I would have had one a while ago.
Yeah, I think it is, but I was shocked and horrified that I hadn't done it earlier because I think the regular price is $4 a month. So for the value that I will get out of this subscription, as I say, I go to it regularly, I reckon $1 a month. It's US $1 a month, so I think it's $20 for the year you sign up for. I'm going to use it a lot. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, some interesting reading, some good mag stuff, it's a good one.
Definitely. I'm usually anti-new subscription because I'm just juggling too many, but for $1 a month, I think I can probably stump
what am I
up.
going to ditch to make room for the new one?
Exactly.
I can stomach $20. I think that's fine.
Yeah, me too. I'll get onto that as well. My recommendation this week, if you didn't catch it on Monday night, Australian Story had an episode on Valerie the Dachshund.
From Albury.
That's right.
Albury comes back again.
I think originally Broken Hill from memory, and maybe now
don't care
Albury.
about the Broken Hill chapter.
I did note that while I was watching. And the couple that own Valerie, this is the little dachshund who went missing on Kangaroo Island for a good couple of years and became this little wild dog, somehow survived all the eagles and everything. And the locals on the island put so much amazing effort into recapturing her. It wasn't easy.
Australian Story are on a bit of a run
I
at
agree.
the moment. I think they've had some terrific profiles, and this one is like, I'm so delighted they did this. I think it's clearly just a cracking yarn. So,
Valerie, she's back happy with her family in Albury.
Yeah, you would be after sleeping rough for a couple of years, and bet she's getting pampered.
Exactly. Extra treats for Valerie.
We will put the links to both of those things in the episode notes if you want to dive in. Squiz Press, just quickly want to explain the change in the lineup. We mentioned it last week. So essentially what we're doing is giving you over the weekend a bit more of a relaxed way to enjoy this sort of content, and particularly the what's coming up part of it. We find that we gallop through that, but actually it's very useful information. So I know certainly when it comes to me getting myself organised for the week, I like to think about those sorts of things on Sunday. So that's going to be a second podcast. You'll be able to access that tomorrow, and we'll take about sort of 10, 12 minutes or so and just sort of lean back a little bit into what's coming up this week, talk about a bit more in context of what's happening and why it's important and why it's in the news or why we're talking about it. I'm looking forward to that, and really looking forward to your feedback as well. So drop us a line at hello@thesquiz.com.au if you want to tell us how you think we're doing it.
Yeah, tell us what you think. It also gives you 2 podcast episodes,
Amazing.
one for each day, which I think works, or else save them both up till Sunday and listen to both then.
A twin set. How amazing. Jodie, thanks a lot. We'll speak on Sunday.
We will. Thanks, Claire.